Buenos días con todos. Sean todos bienvenidos a este evento. Vamos a dar inicio.
Welcome to everybody. We're
En
going
el
to
marco de un
begin.
nuevo modelo de
In the
ecoturismo
framework of a
para
new
Galápagos,
model
el
for
Observatorio
ecotourism
de
for
Turismo
Galapagos,
es una
the
plataforma de
Tourism
investigación y
Observatory is a
diseño para la
research
turística y
platform to monitor tourism
creada
activities in the
desde
Galapagos.
2011.
Implemented
El
in late
observatorio se
2011,
encuentra
the
constantemente
observatory is
mejorando y
constantly
publicando
generating
información
and
clave
publishing
y
key and
actualizada de los
updated
indicadores
information
turísticos de
about the
Galápagos
tourism
para la
indicators
toma
of
de
Galapagos
decisiones.
for decision
Información
making.
que es entregada
This information
periódicamente
is
a
regularly
actores del
delivered
sector
to
público,
public
privado, organizaciones
and
no
private sector
gubernamentales y a
stakeholders,
la academia.
NGOs, and
El
academics.
observatorio es una
The
plataforma
observatory is a
apoyada por un
platform
grupo
supported by
interinstitucional
an
del cual forman
interinstitutional
parte el Ministerio de Turismo
platform
a través de la Coordinación
comprising the
Zona
Ministry of
Insular,
Tourism
el
through the
Ministerio del
Islands
Ambiente del
Authority,
Ecuador a través de
the
la
Ministry of the
Dirección General del
Environment through
Parque
the
Nacional
Directorate
Galápagos,
of the National
el
Park,
Consejo de Gobierno del Régimen
the
Especial de Galápagos, las
Government Council of
municipalidades
the
de
Special Regime of
Isabela, San
Galapagos,
Cristóbal,
the
Santa
authorities
Cruz,
from Isabel,
las
San
juntas
Cristobal, Santa
parroquiales de
Cruz, the
Galápagos,
parish
la Cámara de
boards
Turismo
of Galapagos,
Captural y
the
desde su inicio
Chamber
cuenta con
of
el apoyo
Tourism,
técnico
Capturville, and
del
with
World
technical
Wildlife Fund
support
BB.
from
El observatorio ha incidido en
WWF.
decisiones importantes
The
sobre la
observatory has
planificación
been working
turística de
with
las islas desde
the
2011
planning of
y ha
tourism
tenido
in the
muchos
Galapagos
retos
since
aún por
2011
llegar.
and has
Los
many challenges
resultados
still to
alcanzados
be
representan
addressed,
información clave en el
posed
desarrollo del
by
turismo
information which
sostenible
is
del
key to
archipiélago
developing tourism
y sobre todo en
sustainably
los
in the
mecanismos de
archipelago,
monitoreo y utilización de
especially for
estadísticas
monitoring
turísticas.
and tourism
El evento de hoy busca
training.
dar a conocer el trabajo del
Today we're going to
Observatorio de
learn
Turismo
about
de
the
Galápagos y el
Galapagos
centénfasis
Tourism
en sus
Observatory,
herramientas en línea de
emphasizing the
inteligencia de mercados para
online
negocios
market
turísticos.
intelligence tools
Damos la
for
bienvenida
tourism
y
marketing.
agradecemos la
We'd
presencia
like to
de
welcome you,
Andrea
and we
Romero,
have Andrea
coordinadora
Romero,
zonal del
the
Insular del
zonal
Ministerio de Turismo del
coordinator
Ecuador,
from Ministry of
Daniela
Tourism for the
Riofrío,
islands,
coordinadora
Dario
general de
Ripio, the
Estadísticas e
General Coordinator
Investigación
of
del Ministerio de
Statistics
Turismo
and
del
Research
Ecuador,
from the Ministry of Tourism of Ecuador,
Juan Carlos
Juan
García,
Carlos
director
Garcia,
de
Director
conservación del World
of
Wildlife
Conservation
Fund
of the
BB Ecuador,
WWF Ecuador,
María Lucy Farías,
Nancy Farias,
coordinadora del
who's the
programa de
WWF
ecoturismo BB
Coordinator of
Ecuador,
Ecotourism,
representantes del Ministerio del Ambiente
representatives
del
of the Ministry of
Ecuador,
the Environment of
representantes
Ecuador,
del sector
of the
privado y
private
de industria
sector,
turística,
of the tourism industry,
representantes de la academia y
representatives of
organizaciones
academic
no gubernamentales,
institutions and
técnicos,
non-governmental
empresarios, colegas
organizations,
y amigos.
technicians, business
También
persons,
damos la
colleagues, and
bienvenida a
friends
todos
all.
aquellos que
We'd
están
also like to
conectados a
welcome
través de
those who are
Internet,
connected by
especialmente
internet,
a miembros de
especially those
International
who are
Galapagos Tour
going to the
Operator
International
Association,
Galapagos Tour
INTOA.
Operator Association of TOA.
Sean todos bienvenidos
We'd
a
like
este
to welcome
evento.
you all to this event.
Pedimos la
We'd
presencia
like
de Juan
to
Carlos García,
ask Juan
director de
Carlos Garcia,
conservación de
Director of
World Wildlife
Conservation of the
Fund, para
WWF,
iniciar el evento y dar la
to
bienvenida a los
welcome you,
participantes.
to welcome participants and kick off the event.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning to everybody.
Yo quería primero
I
darles
would
la
like to
bienvenida y
first of all
agradecerles muchísimo
welcome
por
you
venir
and
al
thank you
evento
for
del día de hoy.
coming
Es
to
muy bueno
today's
que
event. It's
el
very good
Observatorio de Turismo
for
de
the
Galápagos pueda
Tourism
estar
Observatory
presente
in
aquí
Galapagos to be
y
present here
contarles
in
sus
Quito
resultados.
and tell
Quería
you about their
únicamente darles
progress
un breve
and
recuento
outcomes,
de
to give you
cuándo
a
y cómo nació el
quick
observatorio y todo el
backstory of
avance y
how the
progreso que hemos
observatory
tenido
was
en estos
created
últimos
and
años
our
que se van a
progress
presentar el día de hoy.
and
En
the
realidad,
outputs that we're
el
going to present today.
observatorio, uno podría
The
decir que
observatory, we
nació
could say, was
después
born after
del 2007, cuando
2007
Galápagos
when Galapagos
fue
was
puesto en la lista de
put
patrimonio
on the
indicativo.
list of
El gobierno
endangered
nacional
World
reaccionó a
Heritage.
eso
The
y hizo
national
un
government
análisis de lo que
reacted and
estaba
made an
sucediendo en
analysis
Galápagos.
of what was going
En
on in
el
the
2008
Galapagos.
y en el
In
2009
2008,
se
2009,
desarrolló un proceso que
a
fue
process
muy
was
participativo
developed very
con diferentes sectores del
participatorily
sector
with
público,
different
privado,
public and
comunitario,
private and
sociedad
community
civil,
sector stakeholders
para
from social,
justamente
civil
ver
society and so
cuáles eran
on
los problemas de
to
Galápagos.
see
Entre eso
what the
estaba
problems of
evidentemente el
Galapagos were. And
crecimiento
one was
muy rápido del
the
turismo y entre
rapid
otros, no
growth of
entraré en ese
tourism.
detalle ahora.
I won't go into
Y
details
ahí
right
fue
now.
cuando WWF,
And that's when
pidió
WWF, at the
apoyo por parte del
request
gobierno, nos involucramos
for
en esto
support
para
by the
poder
government, we
Galápagos. Es
worked
un orgullo
hand in
haber estado
hand.
desde un
We were
inicio
proud to have been with
trabajando
the observatory
bajo
from the
liderazgo del
beginning,
Ministerio de Turismo,
under the
junto con
leadership of the
actores del
Ministry of
sector,
Tourism and other
en
stakeholders
esa propuesta
in this proposal
por un lado, manejo de información y
for
otro es
managing
análisis para la toma de
information
decisiones.
and using it for decision making.
Durante los años 2008 y
During
2009 se hizo el
2008-2009,
diagnóstico,
we
exploramos
did
todas las
the
islas hoteleras de
assessment
Galápagos
in all the
y eso
populated
nos
islands of the
llevó a un
Galapagos, and this
evento
led us to
que
an
fue la
event,
primera cumbre de
which was the
turismo
first
sostenible
summit of
que se desarrolló
sustainable
en San
tourism
Cristóbal
held in San
en
Cristobal
septiembre del
in
2010.
September
Y en esa
2010.
cumbre
At that summit, they ratified four components of this new tourism management model. The components were governance, re-engineering of destinations, market positioning, and the observatories, the fourth component. This fourth component of the tourism observatory is a technical tool for decision making. And the purpose of, I'll read the declaration from the Tourism Summit. The purpose of the observatory is to generate updated information on the dynamics of tourism activities in Galapagos to orient decision making to achieve a new tourism model for the province. The observatory was the first achievement talking about the implementing the new tourism model for Galapagos was the first achievement after designing it and validating it in a very participatory process where we had over 100 stakeholders from the different sectors of Galapagos at the summit. In June, it's been 5 years since the observatory started operating. Throughout the last 5 years, not only WWF and not only the different institutions that are leading the observatory have been able to contribute to this tool for information management, but also we've had very valuable inputs from different partners, different stakeholders who helped us use this tool, including academics, national and international universities, the Central University, the Cuenca University, San Francisco University in Quito, the Santiago Compostela University, the Davis, California University, and in Australia, and privately, we've had major contributions from the Chamber of Tourism of San Cristobal, ECOGAL, the Association of Tour Guides of Galapagos, the Charles Darwin Foundation are some of the partners. I may be leaving out very valuable partners who have seen the potential of this tool and have helped us. I think that I'm very proud to say this. I'm going to, this is something we're going to see. After 5 years of very hard, complicated, and expensive work to gather information from Galapagos, it's expensive to be doing surveys and reports, to generate a technical capacity to analyze the information and get the findings for what we're going to see in a minute. It's been hard work, and I'd like to congratulate the Ministry of Tourism for the leadership that they've had in this process. After 5 years, we have an observatory that is producing different indicators, standardizing and producing indicators of supply and demand, social indicators, environmental indicators. It's a very dynamic tool. This analysis of information management and producing indicators is changing all the time, and that's good for the observatory because it makes it flexible, it makes it interesting. It's not boring. If we're seeing after 5 years, we haven't lost this thrust. We have a tourism observatory after 5 years focusing on the Galapagos that has these indicators that are those things we get is going to explain, and we're going to see the visualizers, the displays. We're working with the database. This is a tool that's useful for decision making. Some decisions are being based on the data produced by this observatory. There are a number of steps that will be taken so it will be used by more Galapagos decision makers. This is one of the challenges we still have, but it's working fine for Galapagos. We, as the VWF, are committed and remain committed to supporting this. And we see at the same time the usefulness of thinking about replicating this sort of observatory nationwide. I'd like to congratulate this initiative by the Ministry of Tourism to bring to the mainland this tool to begin publicly discussing it, disseminating it to use in other tourism destinations. It has a very high value for protected areas such as Galapagos, which is such an emblematic area, and the Cuyabeno National Reserve is one that Juan Carlos will mention. We have the challenge of taking the lessons learned from the observatory and taking them to a national context. And that's all I'm going to say for the time being. I'd like to thank you again for coming to this event and participating. And as WWF, I would simply like to confirm that we're committed. It's been a hard work, and we see the outputs, we see the benefits of a tool not only for tourism issues, but also for sustainable development, for conservation, which those topics that will ensure the sustainability of a unique tourism destination for the world and for the region. Thank you.
A continuación, invitamos para
Next,
su
I'd
intervención a
like
Marixi
to
Farías,
invite
coordinadora nacional
Marixi
del
Farías,
programa
the
de
National
Turismo World
Coordinator of the
Wildlife.
Ecotourism Program of the World Wildlife Fund.
Muchas gracias, Carolina. Muy buenos días con todos. Es muy grato ver a muchas caras amigas.
Wonderful to see so many friendly faces here.
Mencionaba,
As
Caro, al principio el
Caroline
día de
was
ayer cuando
mentioning,
conversaba con Juan
yesterday
Carlos,
when I was
nuestro
discussing
coordinador
this
del
with our
Observatorio de Turismo, me
coordinator
decía,
of the tourism
¿qué tal si
program,
hablamos de la
Juan Carlos
importancia del
Estudillo,
monitoreo de los
I was saying, how
impactos
about
del
we talk
turismo en
about
las
the
islas
importance of
Galápagos?
monitoring the impact of
Y
tourism on
eso
the
es
Galapagos
lo que yo he
Islands?
pedido, que
And this is
de
what
algún
he's
modo
asking,
resuma
that we should
cómo el
I've asked
Observatorio
him
de
to
Turismo
summarize
tuvo
how
un
the
muy
Tourism
importante
Observatory plays a very
este
important
proceso
role
de
in the process
monitoreo.
of
Como
monitoring.
ustedes conocen, Galápagos
As
es
you
un
know,
sitio priorizado a nivel
Galapagos
nacional,
is a high priority site
un producto estrella,
nationwide
y
as star
Galápagos ha posicionado el
product,
Ecuador en el
and
mundo.
Galapagos has
En
made
ese contexto,
Ecuador famous
Galápagos
worldwide. In this
tiene dos
context,
áreas protegidas,
Galapagos
el
has
parque
two protected
terrestre
areas,
y la reserva
the
marina.
land park
El parque
and the
terrestre
marine
es
reserve. The land
97%
park,
del territorio
97% of the land territory is
el
the
área
national
marina
park,
es
and the
100%.
marine area is
Tenemos una
100%.
provincia
We have a
realmente
province that
conservada
is
casi en su totalidad.
almost
Pero sin
totally
olvidar que
conserved,
tenemos sitios
but we
privados
can't
donde
forget that there are
también
populated
tenemos el
areas that will
impacto de la
also
visitación.
have the impact of visits.
Revisando un poco
So,
cómo es la actividad
reviewing
turística en
tourism
Galápagos,
activity in
cómo
Galapagos,
se generan los
how we
impactos,
generate
cómo ha sido el
impacts,
desarrollo en los
how
últimos años.
development has
Nosotros, a través del
unfolded over the last few
observatorio,
years.
podemos
Through the
notar
observatory, we can
cómo
see
se ha implementado la
how
visita
we've
desde la
implemented
modalidad
visits
de
in the
el turismo
modality
desde los
of
centros poblados.
doing tourism
Aquí
from
hay
the
un rol
populated
súper
areas.
importante,
There's a
muy
very
importante de
important
cómo
role,
aportamos
very
a través
important
de
how we
herramientas
contribute
para que
with
los
this
tomadores de
tool so that
decisión
decision
puedan
makers
mejorar las medidas de la
can
visita.
improve their management measures.
La actividad turística
Tourism
es un
activity
servicio
is
ecosistémico.
an ecosystem service in the tourism
Genera
areas.
estos
Galapagos
servicios, no solamente
generates
para los
eco
visitantes,
services
sino
not
también
just
para
for
la
visitors,
comunidad.
but also for the
En este
people who live
contexto es
there.
importante
In this
monitorear
context,
y
it's
evaluar
important to
cuáles
monitor
son
and
los
evaluate
impactos
the
que se tienen
impacts
sobre
that
las
we
especies
have
emblemáticas
on
y también
the
sobre las
emblematic
las
species
especies emblemáticas de Galápagos,
of Galapagos
biodiversidad.
and its
También
biodiversity.
cuáles son los
We
impactos
also
de
have
los
to
centros
see about
poblados
the
sobre las
impacts
áreas
of
protegidas.
populated
Y
areas
también
on the
cómo
protected
podemos de este
areas,
modo
and
levantar
so that we
indicadores
can
socioeconómicos
gather
para poder
socioeconomic
mejorar
indicators
la
to
medida de
improve
seguridad.
the quality of life
El
for
rol
people in those
del
communities.
Observatorio de Turismo
The
entonces
role
va más
of
allá
the
de
Galapagos Tourism Observatory
analizar,
goes beyond
evaluar
systematic
y
analysis,
trabajar con esta información para la toma de
evaluation, and
decisiones.
working with
Como
information for
WWF
decision making.
es
As
para nosotros
WWF,
muy
for
importante
us, it's
el
very
rol de
important.
cómo se
The
articulan todas
role is
las
important of
herramientas
how
de
we
monitoreo
coordinate
dentro de
all the
Galápagos.
monitoring
De
tools
esta forma
for
podemos
Galapagos.
nosotros ver
This way,
cómo dentro del área
we can
protegida
see how
se hace un
within the protected
monitoreo
area we do
que va
monitoring
a estandarizar con
that
las
will
con los indicadores
standardize
que se levantan en el
with
observatorio.
the indicators
Luego
that we
de
have,
esto
that we gather
tenemos
in the observatory.
lo que esperamos
There,
tener al final del día
we
es
have to have at the
el
end of the
observatorio de
day
turismo con
the
unos
tourism
indicadores que
observatory with
nos
indicators
ayuden a
that
medir
will
el
help
impacto
us measure
tanto en las áreas
the
protegidas
impact in
de
protected
Galápagos
areas of
y no
Galapagos
tan protegidas.
and those that are
Este es todo
not
un reto,
protected.
como
This is a
mencionó Juan
challenge.
Carlos, llevamos
As Juan
5
Carlos
años de
Garcia
apoyo a este
mentioned,
proyecto,
we've
muy
been
importante
supporting this
para nosotros
project
como
for 5
organización.
years, which is
Sin
so
embargo,
important for us
todavía hay
as an
muchos otros
organization.
retos
But there are
de
many
nivel técnico
remaining
que se deben
challenges
de afrontar
in
y
technical terms
solventar.
that we have to address and resolve.
El Observatorio de Turismo y el
The Tourism
monitoreo de los
Observatory and
impactos de
monitoring
turismo en Galápagos.
impacts of tourism in
Además de
Galapagos,
monitorear
in addition to
muchos
monitoring,
decimos a nivel técnico que
many
más
of us
allá de
say
monitorear
technically
los
that
impactos
beyond
es
monitoring
necesario
impacts, it's
trabajar
necessary
sobre
to
los
understand
resultados,
with the
trabajar sobre los
findings. We have to
indicadores que
work
nos
with the
se levantan a
indicators
través
that
de
we
esta
gather
información.
with
No
this
solamente
information,
trabajar, sino
not
también
just
tomar
to work
decisiones, ayudar a los
with them,
tomadores
but
de
to
decisiones,
make decisions, to
sensibilizar
help
a
decision
las
makers to
comunidades
sensitize
aledañas
the
a áreas
community
protegidas para
around
que esos
protected
impactos
areas
se minimicen.
so that we can
En este
minimize our
contexto, el
impacts.
Observatorio de Turismo
In this
es
context, the
es
Tourism
una
Observatory
herramienta súper
is a very
importante,
important tool
soportado por un
supported by a team, a technical group of the Tourism Observatory that will help these decisions and this process of the interinstitutional project led by the Ministry of Tourism to reach optimal results. I'd like to invite you once again to look at the details with our coordinator. We'll see what information has been gathered and some challenges in this technical process of gathering and systematically analyzing information so that we can have optimal results in Galapagos Management. Juan Carlos Garcia just mentioned that this is a very important tool for us because it's enabled us to learn a lot during these 5 years. Our lessons learned are going to help us convey this experience to share nationally and internationally. It's important since we began in 2011, 5 years ago. The Ministry of Tourism has been active in launching the first Ecuadorian National Tourism Observatory. But there are other areas in the country that are interested as well. It's also necessary to gauge impacts where we need to measure, take measures with the information that's gathered. So I'd like to invite you to ask the relevant questions to discuss after this first plenary, because there are many issues that have been discussed and maybe details that we can collaborate with many of you. Thank you. Today's event has 2 sessions. The first session, Juan Carlos Isurieta, the coordinator of the Tourism Observatory, will tell you about the work of the Tourism Observatory, highlighting some of the mechanisms that have been developed to position this information in public, private, and academic circles. After that, we'll have a question session. Then at 10:30, we'll have a break. And the second session will begin at 11 until 1:30. The second session will have the practical use of the tools and to see about tourism market status in Galapagos. We'd like to thank you all for coming to this event. And now I'll leave you with Juan Carlos Isurieta, coordinator of the Galapagos Tourism Observatory. Good morning to everybody. First of all, thank you very much for coming, for attending this event. We're practically full here. I'd like to thank those who are also listening to us via the web. We have a major audience connected today by internet. My name is Juan Carlos Isurieta. A couple of years ago, I began working with the Tourism Observatory. As Juan Carlos Garcia and Marusi said, and Carolina has said, this is a tool for decision making. Most of you, let's say some of you, have already heard about the observatory and have been able to work with the data that we're generating from this technical office. But the majority of you, I'm sure, that you've never heard about it and don't know exactly what it's about. So this means that maybe we're not publicizing enough. But we're going to see how the observatory is no longer an agency since we started thinking about it in 2007 and began working in the technical offices. And bit by bit, we've generated information, especially for decision making, but especially by agencies that work on public policy and planning for Galapagos. The issue now, and since all agencies mature, is to mature the observatory so that we'll start generating information for other sectors that can be used above all for the driver of tourism activity when we're the operators, the private tourism operators. For people who are following us by the web and seeing the presentation, I'd like to ask you to move to slide number 3. What you're looking at on the screen now is a picture that most of you can recognize. We all have something in common, that all of you, since you belong to agencies that work directly or indirectly with Galapagos, or you belong to private enterprises that send tourists to Galapagos. The great majority of tourists that reach Galapagos come to some when they're arriving or leaving, especially when talking about the 65% come in through the Baltra airport in Santa Cruz. They have to come in through the Itabaca channel. So it's a paradise. Yes, it's a paradise. Aesthetically, in terms of the appeals, it's a paradise for biologists, for sociologists. And interestingly, in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to try to persuade you all that it's also a paradise for information. The tourists that mostly work with tourism operating firms, private sector, most of your passengers have to come and cross this canal to get to Galapagos, but to be able to enter, or from the minute that they reach the airport, they have to go through a series of stages of um, surveys of questions, and at each point, in different institutions, they generate information. This information, we're going to see bit by bit, section by section, each of these icons that we have at the top. As we move on with the presentation, I'll show you what sort of information we have and how that, in terms of volume, enables us to better understand what's going on in Galapagos. Obviously, in Galapagos, 98% of the tourists take an airplane from Quito or from Guayaquil. Another 2% are lucky enough to have a private yacht and they sail right out. But more, 98% of us get there on an airplane. And when you reach an airport, you begin filling out information of the different sources. Even from before, from the web check-in, they begin generating information. So we have each person in the course of the move through the airport from checking in the airline to the government council that asks for the transit control form, fortunately. The bioregulation agency also asks for statements about what we're taking in our suitcases. And each, they generate about 150 different fields of information, obvious ones such as the birth date, obvious fields such as the airline being used, and others that are not so obvious. That when you start leaving your track, you generate information. After we take the airplane, we finally get to the Tabaca Channel. Tourists have, we can divide the tourism into two major groups. Those who sleep in cruise ships. I'm sure that you know that this was the main tourism industry, and in fact, in terms of numbers, was majority tourism. In arrivals by tourists would live on board the cruise until 29. After 29, things turned around, and most tourists now reach to hotels. But now there's this dichotomy in the lodging service. We live on cruise ships and sail around the islands or on land hotels, land-based hotels. When you get onto a cruise ship, once again, you generate information. And information is generated even before the ship. We've already made reservations, payments, and set fees. And when we get to the cruise ship, we also generate a bunch of information, the preferences of visitors, and information when they check in. There's other information which is quite important for tourists, for these tourists that were following along, how they move around through the Galapagos. And each cruise ship in Galapagos has an assigned itinerary. Interestingly, this enables us to see the position of tourists in different parts of the archipelago at different times. This, once again, this information is very valuable to understand, first of all, the tourism dynamics in Galapagos, and secondly, understand the capacity or how much tourism activity, how we are approaching the resilience capacity of the ecosystem in Galapagos. There are about 350 information fields generated through this cruise ship registration process in Galapagos. For those who don't choose the on-board model, but rather lodge on land, they
un montón
also
de formas y chequeos
have
que
a
hacer.
bunch of ways
Y
of
esos
checking in and
chequeos
providing
en los
information.
alojamientos
In the
también
lodging
generan mucha información.
on land, they generate a
Nuevamente,
lot of
desde temas de
information.
tarifas, pasando por temas de preferencias
The
de los huéspedes,
fees,
pasando por
the rates,
la duración, la
the
estadía que se quiera en el
duration of the
check-in y en
time
el
they're going to
check-out
stay,
del
their check-in and
hotel.
check-out from the hotel.
Generan información que nuevamente
This
es
generates
importante para saber qué
information
es lo que
again
está
that's
pasando con los
important to see
turistas.
what's happening with tourism.
Hemos hablado hasta
We've
ahora del
talked about
crucero
so
con
far
el
about
hotel
the
y
cruise
sabemos que la
ship and the
gente
hotel,
entonces ya
and so we
duerme
know that
y
people
se
are
alimenta en
sleeping
Galápagos.
and eating in the
Pero
Galapagos.
sobre todo por la modalidad
But
de
above
tierra,
all,
sobre
because
todo
of the
para los
land
turistas que
modality
llegan
for
a
tourists who
hospedarse
come
en
to
tierra.
be
Lo
lodged
más
on
común
land, the most common
es que
thing
uno contrate
is for them
tour
to
operador.
engage an operating
En
tour,
Galápagos,
a tour operating.
apenas el 5% de los sitios de
In
visita
Galapagos,
son
only
sitios de visita
5% of the
abiertos al
visitor
público.
sites are open to the public.
El resto de la
The
red de sitios
rest
de visita
of the
son
visitor
sitios
site
a los cuales
network
tienes que
are
llegar
visitor
sí o
sites
sí
where
con
you
un
have to,
operador.
there's no way to get there without a tour operator.
Estamos hablando de que el
So
operador
then
normalmente
the
va a
tour
registrar
operator,
una
once again,
serie
is
de
going to
campos de
register a
información
series of information fields about the tourists. So we're going to keep track from the airplane, from the time that the tourist has started looking for Galapagos on the net, and to get to the airport, to go to the cruise ship, to get on the cruise ship, and to register the hotel. And now they go to the tour agency, and they leave information. They leave their age, their profile, how much they spent, where they went. And this is more and more information fields. We're just talking about a single tourist who's generating all this information. Operators, like ships, have itineraries and assigned visitor sites that they can go to. This is an advantage of having that information that once again enables us to understand more about the flow of tourists in the archipelago. Something that is an advantage because this information is not available anywhere else when we're talking about on the mainland. Like the tour operators in the ships, when you take a tour in Galapagos, most of the visitor sites, they have to have a nature guide accompanying them. There's about 530 active nature guides in the park, and the nature guides are constantly generating information, like the rest of the businesses in the tourism chain in Galapagos. The interesting thing is that the tour guides are generating the guide reports. Each Galapagos National Park guide is obliged to submit an activities report to the national park, not just to say I worked so many days taking so many tourists to such and such sites, but it's a major monitoring tool because in 530 active guides, we're talking about 1,060 pairs of eyes that are going around the archipelago, and they can generate rich information about what they see. I'll soon show you examples of what we've been able to achieve and what we're beginning to achieve, because as Juan Carlos Garcia said a minute ago, that the idea is to make a dynamic tool that would constantly adapt to the different information needs. So we're now working on some guide monitoring platforms. There's conflict of use in some visitor sites, and we found garbage by tourists or from the ocean, or an introduced species, or a local species with such and such behavior. So this becomes information that's deposited by the guides in the Galapagos information system. And finally, when you don't have the good fortune of being on a cruise ship and you have to move around to different boats, you have to take boats and yachts, day tours, bay tours. There are different modalities with an itinerary assigned by the national park to get to different parts. And these boats generate information. The captain sees they have to report that I'm going out with so today on this date with so many passengers, I'm back, and we're this news or no news. So this itinerary we've seen from getting into the airport through the hotels and the cruise ships and going out with a guide and taking boats and yachts. All of these tourism services generate about 1,000 fields of information per tourist. Last year, 2015, 225,000 tourists reached the Galapagos, and each of them generated about 1,000 information elements. So we have over 2 million data points generated per year, and this volume of data, the good aspect is, the good news is that it's a lot of information, very valuable for decision making. Fortunately, with all of these systems and itineraries and the control and monitoring systems in the archipelago, we can generate very precise information about how tourists move around, where they go, and where they stay. But the bad news is that the information outsteps our capacity to analyze it. All of these fields happen through different methods. There's records, registration forms, surveys, online surveys, registration generated by cell phones, by guides, by the tour leaders. There's information all over the place. And the most interesting thing, and the greatest advantage of this information, fortunately, all of these millions of data points generated every year don't depend on a single person or a single institution. They come from the whole network, the whole ecosystem of ecotourism. They come from the Government Council of the National Park, who generates the transit control card, the Directorate of the National Park, Ministry of Tourism, and above all, from private stakeholders, hotels, cruise ships, and tour operators and guides, and ships that all keep records. Of course, most of this information, especially in the private sector, which is partly public, is confidential, of course. Nevertheless, there's a lot of information of a collective nature in all sectors that can be used, publicly disseminated, and analyzed to better understand what's happening in Galapagos to improve decision making. This process of taking these hundreds of sources of information generated by tourism at the airport, in the biosecurity agency, in the boat, and when the guide or in the restaurant, these are forms, the records of surveys in different formats, in different qualities, different types. And the idea of having an observatory is to have a tool that will compile all of these millions of data points and show them in a friendly, user-friendly fashion. Fortunately, as I said a moment ago, as our colleague said, the Tourism Observatory is not just a technical office in the Ministry of Tourism, funded partially by WWF and other stakeholders. Fortunately, many other institutions are crucial partners to the Ministry of Tourism Observatory by in-kind and financial and technical contributions by providing information. But to list them, we have a number of ministries: tourism, the Government Council, the National Park, which is under the Ministry of the Environment. We have the National Secretariat of Planning. We have the 3 municipalities of the inhabited islands that also contribute their information. We have the autonomous decentralized parish governments of Galapagos. We have the Association of Private Tourism Providers, and the constant support of the WWF in technical topics. For people who are following us on the web, that's how far we're going to get there with the file. I'd like to ask you to please go on the links that you've received. There's one called exercise number 3, and you're going to be able to see a display. For those of us who are here, I'm going to switch something, but please memorize our website, www.observatory Galapagos, and visit us when you can. Now I'm going to show you. I imagine that the people in the back may have to squint to see the tiny print. People who are online will be able to see this right there on their screen. What you're seeing here is that we've taken 225,000 tourists who reached the Galapagos last year. We've gathered their information, what airline they used when they came, how old they are, what type of lodging they use, cruise ships, land-based hotels, their age, their months when they came. But the important thing about this display, and the reason that we're no longer doing a PowerPoint presentation, is that I'm sure that here, everyone who's come, because of the title I've given, I'm sure that at some point you're interested in playing around with the data, especially those who have the capacity to analyze data, the academicians, consultants, researchers, public sector decision makers. But the point of the observatory and gathering the information is to take the information and make it available to everybody so that we can play with the data, so that we can have tools that will enable us to make our own analyses and make better decisions in our businesses and our activities as consultants and in our institutions. What you're seeing on the screen here, this display shows in the upper left the passengers that came in 2015. 224,755 tourists came to Galapagos last year. Below that, we have the year-to-year growth, 2011 to 2015. And we have a world map next to that to illustrate where passengers come from. If you see, there's different colors, different tones. We're showing the information of tourists who have visited us from all over the world in Galapagos, and that's why at the 225,000. These 225,000 tourists have these age ranges for people in the back. I'll read off that the ages go from under 14 up to age 14, and from then from 15 to 24, then we go by 10-year slots, just to group the ages, and then we see male and female, and we see the months that they visited in, January, February, and when. And we have at least 205,000 tourists came to land or were on board. As we may go in 2009, things have changed around 68% of tourists since in 2015 were lodged on land. And in the upper right-hand corner, we have the median and average time, 5 and 7 days stay. And then we have 2 more indicators about airline is refusing. Here we have to update the name because we have the 3 airlines that are bringing people and the airport that we entered through. Here we needed more indicators and variables to be worthwhile, but we wanted to start with this part. What is this? Previously, the observatory, the ministry, the council of government, the park, were issuing a bulletin with this information printed. Every February, March, or April, we get all the private, or public, or academic stakeholders will receive this. This is what happened last year. Printed up, static, fixed. What we want to begin doing is to take advantage of information technology tools to make this not be something static, but to be a variable that's usable in real time, more dynamically than static statistics. Above the world map, I hope you can see it says all. All means all countries that have sent tourists to Galapagos. If I click here, we have a list of every country in the world. It's not a random list for just all the countries in the world. No. If there's a country there, it's because there's at least one tourist from that country who's come to Galapagos in 2015. This list is from each country that has sent a tourist to Galapagos. As Cara was saying, there's going to be the question section. The second section is to find, to be able to go into detail in this display. But one thing I'd like to get into is that when we talk about 225,000, is this tourists or people that go? This is just tourists. But how do you know that somebody's a tourist? Because they went and they left within the 60 days of a tourist visit. There are certain other statistical facility to enable us to see this, but this is actually quite sure that we're talking only about tourists.
Si yo selecciono acá un país,
If I
cualquiera,
select
cualquiera
a
sea
country
este,
over here,
en este
whichever
caso
one, in
voy
this
a
case, I'm
utilizar
going to
Canadá.
choose Canada.
Lo que hace es que todas las, bueno, se borraron todas las estadísticas cuando
So we
deseleccioné todos los
erased all the
países.
others
Y al
from all
seleccionar
countries.
Canadá,
When I select Canada,
se muestran estadísticas exclusivas de
it shows
los
us statistics exclusively for the
9.341 turistas canadienses que
9,241
llegaron a
Canadian
Galápagos el
tourists who
año pasado.
came last year to Galapagos.
¿Cuál es el nivel de precisión de esto?
How accurate is
Bueno,
this?
y
It's
bastante alto.
highly accurate.
9.341
The
turistas que han venido
9,241
desde el
tourists
año 2011 hasta el año
from
2015,
2011 to
creciendo, cada
2015,
vez menos,
it's
pero
increasing.
creciendo.
Increasing
Creo que la
more
mayoría
slowly,
de
but
los que
always
están acá
increasing. I think most of us
comprenden la terminología year over year,
understand
la
year
tasa
over
de crecimiento
year.
año sobre año.
The
Entonces, esto
year
quiere
over
decir que
year growth
los
rate. This means that
9.341
the
turistas de
9,341 tourists
2015
in
crecieron
2015
un
were
0.16% respecto a 2014.
0.16% higher than
Pero en el
2014.
2014 habían
In
crecido
2014, it increased
2.33% respecto
2.33% over
al año anterior.
2013.
Acá crecieron el
In
11% y así.
2013, it grew
Entonces, lo que vemos es que la tasa de
11% over
crecimiento del
2012.
mercado
So the
canadiense para Galápagos
Canadian
sigue
market, the
creciendo,
Galapagos,
pero
is
ya no tan
continuing to
rápido
grow,
como
but
estaba
not so
creciendo antes.
fast as it was
Y hay
before.
otras cosas interesantes del
Other
mercado
things that are
canadiense
happening with the Canadian
que,
market,
y por ejemplo, vamos a hacer
for
énfasis
example, we're
acá
going to
en la edad.
emphasize here on the ages.
El rango de edad de las personas
The
canadienses
age
está
range
bastante
of
marcado.
Canadians
Tenemos
is
que
quite
más del
markedly,
si sumamos las dos últimas
if we add
filas
together the
de
two
este gráfico, tenemos
bottom
que decir que el
bars in the bar chart, we
50%
have
de los
nearly
turistas
50%,
canadienses que
over
llegan a
50%
Galápagos
of
tienen más de
Canadian
50
tourists
años.
are over 50 years old.
Pero voy a hacer un ejercicio ahora.
And now we're going to
Acá,
do an
si
exercise.
movemos la vista hacia el tipo de
If we
alojamiento,
look
que es el
at the
pie que
type
está
of
ubicado arriba a
lodging,
la
the
derecha,
bar chart on the upper
vemos
right,
que
we're
prácticamente
going
la
to see
mitad
that
de
about
los
half
turistas canadienses, de
of the
estos
Canadian,
9.300 turistas canadienses,
the
se hospedan a
9,300
bordo, y
Canadians,
la otra mitad,
half
el
stay
47%,
on
se
board
hospedan
a
en
cruise ship
hoteles de
and
tierra.
other half on land.
Si yo tomo esta herramienta y
If
le
I
doy un
take this
clic
tool
a la
and I
porción de a
click
bordo,
on the
los
onboard
9.300 turistas
section,
se
the
convierten obviamente en el
9,300 becomes
53%
the
de turistas
53%
canadienses que
of
se
the
hospedaron a
Canadian
bordo.
tourists who
Y
stayed on
fíjense en lo que
board
pasa con la
and
edad.
see what happens with the
Obviamente,
ages.
es la cantidad de
Obviously, the
turistas
number of tourists
en edad superior a los 50 años
over
crece
age 50
mucho más que si
increases
yo
much
mostraría
higher
la estadística
than if I
solamente
show
al dar clic sobre la
only
porción
for the
del
land portion.
turista canadiense en tierra.
Then
Tenemos que tiene
on
edades
land
mucho
tourists,
más jóvenes.
we see that it's the younger
¿Y qué
ones
pasa si
on
quiero saber
average.
estadísticas
What happens if I
específicas
want to
del
know
turista
specifically
en
about the
tierra
tourist on
canadiense que está
the
viajando en el
Canadian
primer semestre del año?
land-based
Bueno,
tourism
cualquiera.
in the
Tenemos
first
que hacer
half of the
entonces
year? So then we
tomar,
have to take,
seleccionar.
to
Hemos
select,
seleccionado Canadá,
selected
hemos
Canada,
seleccionado
we've selected
tierra, y entonces tenemos que
land-based
seleccionar los 3
tourism,
primeros meses
and
del
now we're
año.
going to take the first 3 months of the year, the first quarter.
Esas son las características.
These are the characteristics.
Las
The
posibilidades
possibilities of cross-referencing information
creo que son bastante grandes.
are quite powerful.
¿Qué pasa si es que no solo escojo
What
Canadá y
happens if I
escojo
don't just
Canadá y
choose Canada,
Estados
but I
Unidos para
choose
entender
Canada and the United States to look
todo
at
el hemisferio
the
norte? Pues lo señalo y me
Anglophone
va a
Northern
dar la
Hemisphere,
estadística compilada de esas dos
and we can
variables.
see
Las
the
posibilidades de cruce de esta
compilation of the
herramienta
two
son
countries. The
enormes.
cross-referencing
Afortunadamente
possibilities of
tenemos
this
ya
tool
algunos
are
tour
enormous.
operadores y algunos
We have some tour
consultores y algunos
operators and
académicos que ya
consultants and
utilizan esta información.
academicians who are using this
Pero
information.
el punto más importante,
But the
porque
most
realmente esta
important
información es
point,
algo
because this
bastante
information
nuevo
is
que se ha
quite
desarrollado
new,
en los últimos
it's been
años
developed over the
y
last few
está
years,
en
and
está todavía en desarrollo.
it's still
Acá
in
nos faltan
variables
variables muy importantes como el
We
gasto,
need
como los
major
sitios que visitan
variables
dentro de
such as
Galápagos,
spending, the
como
visitor sites in Galapagos,
niveles de satisfacción.
levels of
Hay
satisfaction.
más información
There's
y
much more
variables, indicadores
information
que
and
tienen que
variables
ser
and
sumados
indicators
a
that we
esto.
have to
Pero el punto del taller
input.
del día de hoy
But the
es
point
abrir
of
una
today's
pequeña
workshop
puerta
is
y
to
un
open
punto
up
de
the
contacto
door
con
and the point of
todos ustedes que
contact
son
with all of
miembros,
you,
sobre todo están la gran
the
mayoría de
members,
ustedes y de las
especially
personas
the
que nos
great
están
majority of you
escuchando como
all
ven,
people who are
son
listening over the web,
representantes del sector privado.
represent the private
Y lo que
sector.
nos interesa es tener
What
este
we'd like to
servicio
do is have this
de
service
estadísticas para el
of
sector privado y también
statistics
para las
for the
ONGs y
private
también
sector
para el
and for
sector público
NGOs and
y
for the
academia, pero
public
sobre
sector as
todo para el
well,
sector privado,
but
para
especially for the
utilizar
private sector to
esto
use
en el
this
diseño
to design
apropiado y enfocado siempre al
appropriately
turismo
design,
sostenible
focusing on
de sus
sustainable
estrategias de
tourism
comercialización
of
y
the
el análisis y
marketing
la
strategies
inteligencia de mercados que
and
utiliza.
market intelligence
Esta es
and analysis
información
that
de
we use.
225
this information on the 225,000 tourists who came in 2015. This information is on the website. We just have to get in the website and look for the profile of visitors on the website. You go in and you can see a prompt that says, you want the visualizer? Just contact us, tell us who you are and how you want to use the data, and we'll automatically give you access to this display. This is the annual information. Every year, we compile all the information from the control cards, surveys, and so on. We generate the display. But a year is useful for seeing profiles, but it's not useful for determining the latest trends on visit to the Galapagos. So now we're going to move to another display. People who are watching on the web, if you'd like to open up the display from exercise number 2, which is called monthly arrivals. What you have here is another display that you can see with no restrictions on the web. This is updated to April 2016, but on the website, it's updated to the last month that we completed, which is May. So on the previous display, we can see the 225,000 tourists from last year. This shows us in the center the number of tourists that arrived in that particular month. Here I'd like to emphasize, because Galapagos has always had a major delay, a lag in generating visitor statistics. Basically because although we're in the age where we have people's telephones and cables and internet and so on, all of us who are in Galapagos know that there are serious connectivity limitations. These constraints prevent us from using certain technologies. Nevertheless, the latency of information, of statistical information in Galapagos, is a systems issue. So here I'd like to emphasize the work of the Galapagos National Park along with the Government Council of Galapagos. And they've taken the information of 16,500 tourists who came in April and tabulated so fast that we can have this quick count and be able to understand it. We'll get to the end of the display. The last line shows the variation in arrivals. Basically, the variation in arrivals shows us the growth not year to year, but month to month. To understand the dynamics of Galapagos tourism trends in as much real time as possible, we can do up to the last month that has ended. So we'll see something happen here. So for people who are following us on the web, September, December, January, March, and April of last year and this year, we've had drops, especially in April. We had a major drop for Galapagos. Normally, tourism businesses, when we talk to that day, they say tourism is very low. I've had a lot of cancellations. Very few businesses have the good fortune of saying, yes, I had 13% cancellation in my business drop, but very few have that capacity to be able to report this. This display may not show us the capacity for all the businesses of how they won or lost market, but at least we know that as a destination, we're dropping a specific percentage. This display shows us drops by the port of entry. We'll select the Baltra airport, and obviously we have a sharper drop than for the rest of the province overall. And we can also for selecting information in the upper left filter for foreign or Ecuadorian tourists to understand the market. Unfortunately, in tourism, it's difficult. It's not an exact science. And when we have this sort of market slumps, we can know exactly why. Methodology should be able to, we'd have to ask people who were going to Galapagos, identify them and go over to their house and say, why didn't you go to Galapagos? Tell me what happened. And identify the reason. We know that there were a bunch of things that could have affected this. And the truth is that we can't be sure. But what we can do is we see at the top, we have 3 tabs. The tourist arrivals, the estimates
Si
of
damos
tourists
clic en
and the
coyuntura, lo que
situation.
va
You
a
click
pasar
on
es que el
the
Observatorio de
situation.
Turismo, a través
The
de sus
Tourism
aliados,
Observatory, through their
recopila una
partners,
serie de noticias que
gather
sabemos que
the
son de
news
interés
that we know are
en ese mes
relevant
en particular. Entonces,
to
claro,
that
hubo una
month.
caída de 16%. ¿Por
So
qué?
there was a drop
No
of
podemos
16%.
asegurar por qué.
We don't know
Pero
why.
lo que sí
We
podemos
can't be
decirle
sure,
es
but
que
what we
los
can
medios
say is that
típicamente consultados por
in the
operadores de
places that
agencias
are
de viajes
checked
y
by
turistas en general, como
operators,
Revista
tour
Transport,
agencies,
como los
and
Tour,
general
como la
operatives, the
BBC,
tour
como la
ships,
Embajada,
the
como
BBC,
etcétera,
the
etcétera, etcétera,
embassies,
se
and so on.
publicaron estas
They
noticias. Y
published
hay una
these
serie de
news.
noticias aquí
And
que
there's a
se
bunch of
publican
news
mes a
here
mes
that is published
con
month
los
by month
links, porque
with
obviamente el
the links,
observatorio y
because
las
obviously the
personas que hacen el
observatory, the
observatorio
people who do the
no se
observatory,
responsabilizan de las
are
noticias,
not
pero
responsible
sí
for
se
the news,
responsabilizan
but we
de
do have the
conectarlas
responsibility
y
for
mostrarlas en
gathering the
esta
news
coyuntura
and
particular.
showing all the news
Esto cada 15
on
días
the
se va
conjunctional
a mostrar
situation.
actualizado.
This is updated
Perdón,
on the
en los
display.
primeros 15 días de
In
cada
the
mes
first
se va a
half of
mostrar
each month,
actualizado
it's updated
respecto al
to
mes
the
de
preceding month.
No voy a ahondar mucho en estos
I won't go
visualizadores,
into a lot of
solamente algunos
details. I'm
ejemplos,
just
porque
going
la
to show you
idea
the
de esta
displays
presentación
because the
es
idea of this
mostrar el
first session is
alcance del
to
trabajo
show the scope
y
of
la
the
idea de
work
hacia dónde nos
and
queremos
the
mover
idea
con el
of where
observatorio.
we'd like to go with the
Ahora quiero
observatory. Now
pasar
I'd like to move along
a
to
otro visualizador que nos
another
parece bastante
display,
interesante.
which we think is quite interesting.
Por favor, para la gente
Please, for
que
people
nos
who are
sigue en
watching
la
on the
web,
web,
pueden ingresar
please
al ejercicio
move
número 1.
into exercise 1.
Y en este de acá lo que tenemos es el
This one
visualizador
shows
del
the
número
display of
anual de
the
visitantes a
annual
Galápagos.
number of
Entonces,
visitors to
igual es muy parecido
Galapagos.
al primero que les
It's very
mostrado,
similar to the first one
que
that I
nos dice la
showed you,
estadística por país,
which
pero bueno,
shows the
el
country by
punto de
country
esto es
statistics.
que
But the point of this
sobre
display,
todo aquí me quiero enfocar en
especially what
algo,
I'd like to
particular,
focus on,
y es
is
que
one
en la
particular
segunda
element
pestaña de
on the
este,
second tab
de este visualizador nos
of
permite
this display. It
comparar
shows,
ciertos
they
mercados. Es
enable
una
us to
herramienta que nos
compare
permite a nosotros
different
entender
markets. This
históricamente
enables us to
cómo
see
se
historically, to
distintos
understand
mercados
how
se
different
comportan en
markets
su número, en la
behave
cantidad de
in the
visitantes que
number
llegan
of visitors
a
who
las islas.
come to the
Para la
Galapagos.
gente que está en la web, si es que
For
no
people who are on
pudo
the web, if you weren't
abrir
able
pronto,
to open this
el momento de
quickly,
abrir el
when you
visualizador
open
deben
up
ir
the
a la segunda
display,
pestaña,
go to the
que se
second,
llama
the right
Observatorio de
hand,
Mercados de Visores.
it's called
A la
um,
izquierda, nosotros tenemos nuevamente
origin
filtros que
market
nos permiten
comparison.
escoger nuevamente, no son
This enables
países
us to
seleccionados al
look
azar,
at, this is
sino que son
not
todos
just
los
a
países
random
que han
list of
visitado
countries,
desde
but
el
all the countries
2007 hasta
that
el
have visited
2015.
from
Es
27
nuestro
to
horizonte de tiempo de
2015
análisis. Ahora,
for different kinds of
los
analysis. But
países que han llegado
the
turistas
countries that
y
have
podemos
sent
escoger
tourists, and
distintos
then we
países
can
para hacer las
choose
comparaciones. En estos
different
momentos
tourists to
están
make the
mostrados
comparison.
de
Here
manera
we're showing
predeterminada, está mostrado
predetermined,
las curvas de
we see
crecimiento
the
o
growth
decrecimiento
curves or
desde
decrease
2007 hasta
from
2015
2007 to
de los
2015
países
for
Alemania, Argentina,
Germany,
España, Estados
Argentina,
Unidos, Italia,
Australia,
Reino
United
Unido.
States, Italy, and the
Y
UK.
podemos escoger aquí cualquier
And
país.
here we can
¿Por
choose
qué? Porque
any
sabemos que los
country because we
operadores
know that the
trabajamos con
operators work
mercados específicos.
with specific
Si queremos
markets.
entender más
If we
ese
want to
mercado,
understand more about each market,
también podemos escoger
then we can
el
choose
mercado de ese país. Por ejemplo,
that market,
podemos
that country.
escoger, vamos
For
a escoger
example,
solamente
let's
para
look
hacer el
at just
ejercicio en
for
vivo,
the
para que la gente en la
exercise to
web
do
nos
it
pueda
live. I hope that the people on the
pues,
web can
voy a
follow along.
dejar prendido
I'm going
solamente
to leave only
Argentina,
Argentina. I'm going to click
Estados
the
Unidos, voy a
checkbox for
empezar,
Argentina,
vamos a
United
poner
States.
Argentina, Estados
We'll
Unidos,
turn on
vamos a
Argentina,
quitar
United
Italia,
States. We'll take Italy off the list,
vamos a quitar Reino Unido, vamos
and
a
we'll
dejar
take the UK
solamente
off. We're only going to look at
el cono sur, vamos a dejar
the
a
southern
Argentina y
corners,
a Chile.
Argentina and Chile only. Argentina
Interesante
and
la curva de
Chile.
crecimiento, ¿no?
See the growth curve. Interesting.
Esto es Argentina, la
This
línea
is
azul,
Argentina, the
Chile
blue
es la
line,
línea
and Chile is the green line.
interesante crecimiento que hay
Interesting
hacia el
growth
final
and a
del
drop off
2015.
toward the end of 2015.
Y lo que tenemos abajo
What we
es
have below there
un diagrama que nos
is a
permite
diagram
conocer,
that
que nos
enables
permite
us
comparar
to
dos cosas.
compare two things.
Una cosa es decir el
One
crecimiento
is
año sobre año que tiene un
the
mercado, que nos
year-to-year
permite
growth for
entender
the
la
market
tendencia
that
que
shows us
y
the
nos permite ver
trend
el comportamiento,
and the
digamos,
behavior,
histórico de este
the
mercado.
historic
Pero el
behavior
otro
of this market.
indicador muy
The other
importante
very
es
important
entender cuál ha
indicator is
sido
to
su
understand
tasa anual de
the
crecimiento
annual
compuesta, que es
compound
realmente
growth
la
rate,
medida que
which
deberíamos
is
utilizar
the
para
measure
en un
that
periodo
we should
determinado de
use so
tiempo
that
vemos
in
que
a
el
given
mercado se ha
period we
comportado
can see
en
how that
general.
market
Cuando
has
uno ve la
behaved
curva de arriba
overall.
dice, wow,
When you look at the curve at the
Argentina
top,
ha
you say,
crecido
wow,
mucho.
Argentina has really
Pero
grown.
hay que ponerle un valor.
But we
Y
have
ese
to to
valor
set,
es la tasa anual de
say how
crecimiento
much,
compuesto
which
y
is
el
the
valor que vemos acá
compound
de
growth rate.
Y.
And what we have on the
Después de valor, que es la
y-axis
cantidad de turistas que van.
is the number
Obviamente,
of
si yo, por
tourists.
ejemplo, acá prendo
So if I
a otro país como Ecuador,
turn on another country such as Ecuador,
vamos a ver que,
we're going to see that
obviamente, por
obviously
escala,
For the scale,
abajo, obviamente,
you
también
can only see the
Ecuador
ocean, and
con
obviously
70,000
Ecuador,
turistas en
with
2015,
70,000
obviamente
tourists in
opaca la
2015,
cantidad de visitantes
obviously casts a shadow over Argentina and
En
Chile.
fin, son,
Ecuador
vamos
sees
a
more,
entrar
much
en detalle
more
en estas
tourists.
herramientas más adelante
We'll get
en el
into the
evento.
details of these tools
Solamente les quiero
through the
mostrar un
course
par
of
de
the
más
event, but
para
I'd
no
like to
aburrirlos
show
mucho.
another couple of tools
Y es que a
quickly
través,
so that you'll
con
not be
apoyo de
bored.
WWF
With the support of
y con la Fundación
WWF
Charles
and the
Darwin,
Charles Darwin
otra de las
Foundation,
cosas que se empezó a
another thing
analizar
that
es
we
pues,
began
la
to
representación de la
analyze,
información
we talked about
panorámica,
the panoramic
información
information,
de gente que
an
llega a
overview
Galápagos.
of people who come to the
En general
Galapagos.
podemos
In
escoger si
general,
son de un país en
we
particular,
can
si son de un tipo de
choose if
alojamiento en
from a
particular,
particular
si
country, a
entraron por
particular
un
type of
aeropuerto en
lodging, if they
particular.
came in through a particular airport.
Pero la intención del
But
observatorio
the
también es
intention of the
trabajar mucho
observatory is
más
all to work
específico. Con la
more
Fundación Charles
specifically with
Darwin
the Charles
empezamos
Darwin
a hacer
Foundation.
programa
We
de
began doing
estadísticas
this
que se
statistical
llama
program, which is called
DiveStat
Dive
Galápagos.
Stat
Disculpas para la
Galapagos.
gente que nos sigue
My
por la web.
apologies to people on the
Este
web.
visualizador todavía no
This
está cargado.
display
Vamos
is not
a
uploaded
enviar
for you.
desde el link
We're going to send you the link
del evento.
in the middle of the
Acceso
event
a
during the
las
coffee break.
10:30
We'll send you
de la
this
mañana, hora
link at
Ecuador
10:30
2025.
Ecuador Mainland Time.
Pero este programa, pero bueno,
But this
probablemente puedan ver
Dive
la
Stat
presentación por
Galapagos
la
program,
cámara.
and I'm sure you can see over the
Este
camera,
programa lo que busca
this
es
program, what it's
entender
trying to
las
do is to
tendencias de
understand
mercados específicos de
specific
Galápagos por
market
mercados
trends
de
in the
crucero,
Galapagos, such as the
de
cruise
de
ship
usos de Galápagos. Las estadísticas que les voy a
ship
mostrar ahora
market.
todavía
The statistics I'm
todavía no
going to
son
show are not yet
definitivas, porque
the
recién
definitive
empezamos a
ones
hacer
because we're
pruebas
just
hace 2
beginning
meses
to, we
con grupos
started tests 2
seleccionados
months ago with
de
select
operación de
groups
buceo.
for
Pero el punto de esto
dive
es empezar
operators.
a
The
tener
point is
estadística,
to
al igual
start
que vimos
having
hace un momento,
statistics,
estadística
just
mensual
we
de cómo
saw
está
the monthly
llegando la
statistics
cantidad
about
de
how
turistas a Galápagos, si eso es un incremento,
tourists are reaching
decremento
Galapagos, if it's
respecto al
growing
mes
or
anterior,
decreasing
etcétera.
regarding
La idea es tener
compared to the previous
la
month and so
cuantificación
on,
del número de buzos
but to
que
quantify
llegan a
the number of
Galápagos.
divers who come to Galapagos.
Entender si crecen o decrecen,
To understand
entender
if it's
cuánto
growing or
es ese
decreasing
crecimiento, el
and
número de
see how
turistas,
much
cómo se ha
the
venido
number of dive
comportando.
tourists are
Estamos
growing
incorporando
or
un sistema de
behaving.
medición de la
We have
satisfacción
a
de los
system of
buzos.
measuring the
Aquí
satisfaction of
solamente
divers.
se muestran
Here we
categorías
see
generales
only the
de
general
los elementos de
categories
satisfacción que
of the
estamos
elements
buscando
of
medir
satisfaction that
en
we're
la
trying to
operación de buceo.
measure
Pero
in
realmente
dive
el programa
operations, but
completo
in the
estamos
full
intentando medir
program,
primero la satisfacción del buzo
we
con
want
los
to measure
equipos de visita,
diver
con el staff,
satisfaction
con la
with the
calidad
visitor
del
side, with
dive
staff,
master
with the
o
quality of the
guía
dive
que
master or
acompaña.
guide,
Estamos
accompanying
midiendo la
group,
calidad de la satisfacción,
measuring the
estamos
quality
midiendo
of the ships,
la satisfacción de
the satisfaction of
los turistas con las operaciones,
tourists with their
estamos midiendo la
ships,
satisfacción de los turistas
the
con las medidas de
satisfaction of
manejo,
tourists with the
la satisfacción
management measures, and
física de con
satisfaction of
interiores
visitors
de la embarcación,
with
servicios
the
de
inside of the
estado,
ship, the
etcétera.
services and
También, así
agencies,
como
and
les
so on.
mostramos al inicio, vamos a tener
As we showed before,
información
we're going to
detallada
have
de dónde
detailed
vienen los buzos,
information
porque
on
en el
where
primer
divers come
visualizador
from.
que mostramos, que
In
tenía
the
la
first
lista de países,
display that we had
podemos
with the
ver
list of countries,
las edades y
we
todo.
could see their
Esa
ages
información
and
la
so on.
colectamos en el aeropuerto.
This
Si
information we
bien es
gather
cierto,
at
en
the
el aeropuerto
airports. And now,
podemos
although at
decir,
the airport we can say
aplicar
we
un
can
registro,
apply
una encuesta,
a record, a
una
survey,
encuesta al final le estaría diciendo, ¿usted
that would
buceó
be
en
saying,
Galápagos?
did you
¿A dónde
dive?
fue a bucear,
Where
etcétera?
did you go
Podríamos
dive?
utilizar una
And so on. We could
muestra
have a
apropiada
sampling
para obtener
appropriately
esta
for
información. Podríamos
gathering this
extrapolar la
information. We
información
could
para tener estos
extrapolate the information
indicadores.
to have
Nos
this list
interesa
of
mucho
indicators.
tener
We're very
información
interested
muy
in
fina
seeing very
desde las agencias de
finely
buceo, porque
divided,
necesitamos, ustedes saben,
differentiating
hay un
information
contexto
from the
que
dive
es
operators. You know, the
la
context
declaración
is
de santuario marino en
the
Galápagos.
declaring
Sabemos
the
que esto va
marine
a tener
sanctuary. We
un
know that
impacto
this is going to have an
en
impact
Galápagos.
on
Queremos empezar a
Galapagos.
medir
We want to begin
exactamente quiénes son nuestros mercados,
gauging
hablando
what
del sector buzo.
markets we have
Y hay
for
otra cosa
divers.
que algunos la llaman citizen
There's another
science,
thing that we people call
ciencias
citizen
ciudadanas.
science.
Lo que ustedes tienen acá
What you
es
have
un mapa de
here
Galápagos,
is a map of
lamentablemente por
Galapagos.
resolución, para que la gente atrás no lo va
Maybe
a
you
ver
won't
muy bien.
see the
Acá
islands,
tenemos
which are a little
Isabela, la
faint
isla
in
más
this. We have
grande,
Isabella, the
Cruz,
largest island, Santa
y
Cruz, and you have
unos círculos de colores.
some
Cada vez que
brown
una persona
circles.
realiza una inmersión
Every
en
time somebody
Galápagos,
dives
al
on the
salir de la
Galapagos,
inmersión
when they
siempre
get
hay
on
un
the dive,
briefing,
there's
lo que
always a
llaman
debriefing that
una
they call.
charla o una compartir
A
información de lo que
discussion
han
to
visto
share
los
information of
buzos
what the divers
cuando
saw
estuvieron fuera del agua.
when they were underwater.
Y obviamente siempre hay
And there's
especies banderas que
always
son muy
the
importantes para
flagship
los buzos
species
y
that are
que
important for divers, and that's their main interest. When we do the debriefing, people say, "Oh, I dived when I dove there. We saw it's a wonderful place for diving, for land-based diving again. As you know, in Galapagos, there are people who pay on onboard navigating the ship to go sleep in the ship and dive, but staying on the ship. But the great majority of divers lately, the segment of divers that is growing the most stay on land. For example, Port Ayora, and there they hire an agency and they go to the nearby site. One of the most is Gordon Rocks. The Gordon Rocks are generally in great demand because of the possibilities of sighting hammerhead sharks. So what happens there? The demand begins to be interested very much in a particular site because it's rumored that you can see sharks there easily. Whether it's true or not, beyond that, there are other places where you can see them too, where you can see hammerhead sharks as well. When we concentrate the demand on a single place, despite management and itinerary and control by the park, if we overuse a site, we can degrade it. So what's the idea? In the debriefings with divers, the divers mention what species they sighted. This display shows, in this case we're talking about the hammerhead shark. Let's look at the hammerhead shark and it will show in the last month we don't have many sightings. Where did they see the most hammerhead sharks? And it won't necessarily be at the Gordon Rocks. This enables us to position other places to monitor and manage. It's not scientific evidence because recognizing a hammerhead shark may be easy, but differentiating rays, which ray, or telling one fish or marine species from another. But this is interesting for the operatives to choose other visitor sites for diving. This program is just being put out, and more operators are giving us this information in an orderly manner to get these statistics, and I'd like to show you. For the sake of time, we're moving quickly. I'll show you one more display, which is available for people who are watching on the web. Exercise number 4. We've been talking about tourists, we've been talking about divers, we've talked about countries. Now let's talk about the tourism offerings, the supply. Ministry of Tourism want to get the tourism offerings in good shape and with the records up to date. But the observatory and the added value is to generate situational statistics, not just in the observatory, but the Ministry of Tourism and the general coordination of statistics to have situational tourism for the whole country, including Galapagos, which is part of the national situational statistics system. But what I'd like to show you here is that this is the display of the tourism statistic for Galapagos, the cadastral record, which is the roster of all regulated, authorized tourism operators. And as you see at the top, we have different tabs: lodging, food and beverage, tour agencies, ships, and search by name. In each tab, now we're looking at lodging. We can see the total number of existing hotels. What we're seeing there, the image in the center of the display is a map of the Google map. If we zoom in, we can have much more precision. I'll show you that later. If we filter this, we can show exclusively for a certain place. For example, Isabella. Isabella has 63 hotels at this time that I'm showing you, but some of them are getting the situation up to date. And once they get everything in order, you'll be able to find on the website the up-to-date number of hotels. Why are we looking at this? Well, this is a guide. It's geo-referenced to the tourism business. Says who needs this information. Some people locate their business because the capacity to receive passengers, their classifications and categories. The idea is to enable operators and people in general to select different criteria. For example, we're going to look at all the filters. We want to see all the lodging establishments that have over 2 rooms, from 2 to 50, from 25 to 50. So there's only 15 such large hotels. We want to know which ones they are, and I can zoom in on the map. I can get in quite close. If your internet is fast enough, you can see this. We can get into this level. This is Google Maps as our server. The map is constantly updated. These are the hotel establishments that have those criteria that we've searched for, and we have the contact form. This is the hotel number X that has this category, how many stars, how many rooms, their email and their website, and so on. Many researchers have told us it's essential. We have the statistics on the growth of the number of tourists in Galapagos by country. We can have the diver statistics and so on. In supply and demand, how does availability respond to that demand? With these criteria that we put into all larger hotels over 15 rooms, this shows us their historic growth. And they've grown gradually in the last few years, and below it shows us the summary chart of the establishments and what categories they're in, how many star hotels, their characteristics, and the number of establishments, and we have filters as well. In the second session, we're going to get into the details. We have the number of rooms, number of beds, and total establishments by category, by island, by capacity. There are broad possibilities, and we can do the same with food and beverage. We're going to see just the same. 142 food and beverage establishments registered here. We have the growth rooms, the capacity filters, category filters, and so on. This service has been available since about January of this year. And every time that we can, unlike the situational statistics on visitor arrival, this is updated every chance we have. When we have a request, an application for a new establishment, we update this right away. For the sake of time, I'd like to show you one more display that we're not going to show by internet. I'll just tell you about. We're talking about the guides, and the guides also generate information fields on Galapagos. And now, fortunately, thanks to technology, what we're doing is enabling guides to take their cell phones or tablets and report things to us, things that are important for protected area management, introduced species that are cited, the sightings of endemic species of Galapagos, or Galapagos species that have unusual behavior, the infrastructure of the good or bad condition facilities, the use of tourism sites. There's a tourist site, but we just saw a fishing boat there. What we're doing now, with the support of WWF and the division, the Directorate of the National Park, is to take those reports and begin to analyze them historically to see different ways that tourism or other agents affect the local ecosystem of Galapagos. As we're showing in this display, we see on the screen, we're showing hotels. A moment ago, we were showing you hammerhead charts. What we're going to do is generate a mark so the guides can see month by month and day by day the different stresses, the threats, the impact factors stressing the island ecosystems, so that the guides can get feedback on their work and also for decision makers to know that there are visitor sites with infrastructure that's in bad condition or that they're reporting conflicts of use with other non-tourism modalities. This information is essential for the national park and other agencies to resolve problems more quickly than we're doing at this point, because at this time, no matter when we look at the archipelago, and we know that there's populated areas here and here and here, especially where there's the hotels concentrated that we just looked at on the map, going from those towns to go monitor the whole archipelago on ships would use huge amounts of fuel, personnel to keep people alive traveling around. We don't have the budget to do this efficiently to make it affordable and sustainable. But what we're trying to do with these tools, with the guides, is to integrate it into private service into monitoring so they'll play an active role in monitoring tourism activities, obviously with oversight by the Galapagos authorities. In general, that was my presentation that we had. We had 10 minutes before the first session is over. I understand that we may have something else to say, but before we get into the closing message, what we'd like to say is that this tourism observatory has many stakeholders backing it up. And we're moving from hard copy statistic to dynamic statistics. This is available on the website. It's available for queries, for downloading, for in-depth analysis by scholars and decision makers, and for tourism operators in Galapagos. For the time being, we're going to look at it. In the second session, we're going to look at a couple of displays. The idea is to have the door open so that from now on, we won't only be users of the observatories, which is very interesting. But I was telling you about the story of these tourists who come to the Galapagos and generate a lot of information. That information doesn't always reach public institutions. Most of it goes to private institutions, and all the most is confidential. A lot of that information from your business can be reported collectively that will enable us to have this sort of displays up to date with information that we think will be useful not just for your particular initiative, but also for the collective of tourism stakeholders in Galapagos. This is just a sample. Now we're about to close out the first session, but we'd like to open up time for questions here. If we have questions via internet, we're going to do this by and they will read questions posed by the chat. For people who are on the web, we're going to or by email to answer all your questions. So, thank you, and we have a minute for questions, reactions, and comments. Thank you. My name is Pablo Peña. I'm the manager of Celebrity Expedition. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you. Thank you for this invitation. It's an extraordinary initiative. And of course, congratulations for the information. This is very satisfying to see the good information we have now. This is fundamental for our operation. I just have a question, or perhaps two. The information is very complete. It looks very in-depth, but we're presenting it the way that the observatory wants to display it. Is it possible in this model, in this observatory, is it possible to export the information to, for example, to Excel spreadsheets to manipulate the information and process it? That's the first question. Is the information available only in Spanish, or is it available in English as well? That's all. Perfect. The first question In fact, yes, you can download when you get into the website. Our friends online, in fact, are looking at the exercises on the website. I'm going to try to upload it here for you right now. Let's see if our connection will hold. You're going to have a button that you're always going to find. Looking at the website, let's go to the annual arrivals in demand. People who are watching by the web, I can see the screen. You're always going to find a large text block at the beginning. Annual arrival, and you say, "Oh, look at all that text." I wanted an online tool, and I have all this text. This is the method through which, because there's certain limitations for certain information we're showing, this is like the technical fish that shows us in the display that's on the website. This is the one that I was showing you a minute ago about the second tab, comparing the international markets. And here, suppose I want to download the information. I'm going to see this in detail play, but if I select these values and I say download, I can do a cross-referenced tabulation, which is an Excel file. For then we have the second session will be training on this. We can export the information in different in CSV, in Excel, and PDF, and graphic format, and so on. So the first question, yes, you can. And secondly, if there's something that's not available in the visualizer, the direct website has a message space. We have a response time of 1.7 days for answering requests when you ask for the raw information we have available on the website. The second question here, I have to apologize to people who are watching by the web. The presentation we've sent today is translated, and we're translating. We have the interpretation simultaneously live, who's translating for you at this moment. We have the contents of this time on the observatory are only in Spanish, but we're because we have most of the users of observatory information are in non-Spanish speaking countries. So we're in this process. We're resolving this. We will soon have the Spanish and English versions. Thank you. Andrea Munoz from the Catholic University, thank you for the invitation. I would like to echo the congratulations for the observatory in Galapagos. I don't know if maybe because of time, there's certain things that we're like, I'd like to know more, but the observatory is not just supply and demand, but as we're moving along in environmental indicators, apropos what you were saying about divers and guides that we can have, they can be key informants about what's going on with the species in Galapagos. So I'd like to know how we're moving along. Today's presentation more supply and demand, and that's why you present it that way. The other thing that I wonder about more is the social issue. We're talking about, I don't know if they've already determined this, about the life cycle of the Galapagos destination, about whether there's annoyance or satisfaction by the residents with tourism activities. You mentioned that, well, there's less occupation, but the supply has increased so much that this is having an impact everywhere. So these are the two issues that I'd like to see about that how we're doing progressing, because like a month ago I looked at this and to make a presentation because I think the data that you had were worthwhile. I didn't see any of this, and this is why I'm asking the question. In any event, I would like to congratulate you for this initiative because it's a major initiative that also shows a high degree of coordination among Galapagos institutions, and that's also something that we have to acknowledge, in addition to all of the information that's being generated. Those are my questions. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Andrea. Regarding the environmental and social statistics, We started the observatory when we had indicators from four major indicators: supply, demand, environment, and society. The supply and demand statistics, because of the demand for the data, were the first ones to be transformed into this sort of displays. And we're currently transforming the environmental and social statistics. And in fact, it's very important to have a clear understanding environmental. We have two major groups of indicators. First of all is park management indicators. We have the example that I gave you about the guides. Monitoring of visitor sites. This is a role of the national park. Nevertheless, as the observatory, we're giving technical assistance to create this sort of displays that will enable us to improve the speed with which the national park can show, for example, frequency or intensity of their visitor sites. The other great group of environmental indicators is tracking consumption of natural resources and generation of garbage and other wastes. In fact, we have the indicators, they're available within the observatory, but we don't have them on the website, and we haven't made displays. That doesn't mean that we haven't done everything that we wanted to do in the last couple of years. But to determine with statistical significance the values of demand for natural resources, especially in Galapagos, is a gigantic challenge because of the lack of recording session for consumption of water in Santa Cruz. I can't give you a percentage, but the great majority of establishments and homes don't have water meters. Surprising, it's an island and we don't have water meters, and those who do, with an old technology that measures air and water that go through the meter. So it's hard to use that data. We don't have solid statistics to show this information. This is in the plan of indicators for the Galapagos Observatory, and we're gathering the information, but we're not publishing it yet because there are drawbacks with the information available. We're trying to strengthen that, and with social issues, I have to acknowledge that this time the observatory is generating information directly on employment, direct and indirect tourism jobs, impact on the Galapagos economy. It's not published on the website. These are the statistically reliable indicators, but we haven't had time to turn them into viewers on the website. But there's one key issue that we mentioned ago, and how the destination is reacting to tourism. We're very clear with the curves that we showed that the boom of supply in business is gigantic. And land is very fast growth in Galapagos business, which has major social implications in terms of employment, perception, tourism, and involvement of academic sectors of Galapagos with tourism, professionalization of Galapagos services. And although certain indicators are gathered, we have to recognize that the work of the observatory is still being gathered. I'd like to take advantage of this issue of having information that can be extracted and improved to invite you to begin networking among users and information managers, academics, private sector, and the population. We have to continue processing the information so that we can have increasingly mature indicators. Or questions? That's either good or bad that we don't have more questions. I don't know if we have questions via the chat. We're going to review them. We have some questions, but they're not. We're going to ask. We're going to review them because it looks like most of them are technical access issues. There's no fundamental question. There's technical questions that we're going to solve during the break that we're about to take. So thank you very much. I believe we're closing out our first section. So Carolyn will introduce another couple of speakers, and I'd like to thank you again for those who've come just for the first session, and for those who are going to stay for the second session to find out exactly how the viewers display. So thank you again for your attention.